Right, in 1972, on February the 5th, I was nearly 16. My birthday was the following week, so at the time I was 15. We got tickets for what was the Len Weston stand, and we were in there on the day of the big match.
Now, you were people at Lupton, so if you can just tell us that and the story of the chaplain.
Well, yes, I was a pupil at Lupton School, and Lupton was very much a rugby school, but we had a chaplain, Derek Lunt, who was a mad Evertonian fan, and it had been so wet, our school games were cancelled, so for weeks, so we'd come to the ground during the week before and got tickets, queued and got tickets. There is a little story around that. The chaplain, who was wearing his dog collar, and there were four of us, as I recall, because he could only get four of us in his car. He walked through the queues saying, make way for the chaplain, I'm attending a funeral. And the idea was that we, the boys, would just drop off and stand in the queue. Of course, people weren't having that. You know, they queued for hours. So, but I always thought, well, that's great role modelling from your school chaplain. So that is one of my sort of resonating memories of that occasion, really.
Well, tell us about, what did you wear on the day?
Well, I vividly remember wearing an army greatcoat, and most people had parkas in those days. Parkas were, just everywhere. But my auntie had given me some money for my birthday, and I bought an army greatcoat from Jessens. And Jessens, anybody who lives in Hereford will have known Jessens, the army stores and camping stores in Irongate. So hugely proud of this brand new army greatcoat with, I remember it vividly, with epaulets and shiny brass buttons. And at the time, I thought, I've made it. I'm fresh off Carnaby Street. I went home, and my uncle was having his tea, and I walked in wearing the coat, and I just remember him. He jumped up, and he said, "Get it off, get it off." And I was thinking, don't you mean get it on? That's the song of the times, Mark Bolan. But he was furious, and he came over to me and ripped all the buttons off. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Listen, people have died in that coat for this country. No young wastrel like you has the right to wear that coat." So, but again, that's a real, clash of cultures and sort of an examination of the social times. Obviously, the war and the memories of the war were still very powerful, But he was a big Hereford fan, massive fan.
Tell us about the moment while you Radford scored that killer shot. Where were you and what happened after?
Well, when the Radford goal was scored, I've got to be honest and say I wasn't actually watching. I don't know what I was watching. I think I was looking at people in the trees or people on the roof of the meadow end. I don't remember, but I just remember this massive explosion of noise, a cacophony of noise, people just hugging and screaming, and then everybody just seemed to run on the pitch, and I thought, that seems like a good idea. But I had, like Cuban boots or something at the time, and I remember the mud was sort of, it was quite difficult to walk and run in it, but I was on the pitch and just dancing up and down and jumping about. Of course, no replays in those days, so you didn't get a second chance. It had gone. Obviously, I've seen the goal many times since, and I just wish really I'd been paying a bit more attention. But that is, that's the truth of the moment. But I did see Ricky George's goal, so You know, I think all's forgiven there.
Was there a similar reaction to that goal?
Well, there was, but I think Radford's goal, what was, you know, the equaliser. It was such a stunning goal. I mean, like Pelle's goal in the World Cup. You could put it up there as a goal. I think if you saw it all your life, you would remember that goal. It was, given the conditions, because they were atrocious, to hit the ball as sweetly and as perfectly as that. And bearing in mind, you had an international goalkeeper in Ian McFall in the goal, and he couldn't get anywhere near it. It was just amazing.
So there was a local bobby on duty that day. Tell us what happened to him.
Yeah, the local policeman, Roy Short, my cousins were very, very friendly with his daughters, so we sort of knew Roy quite well. But he was a local bobby. He was born a bobby. He'd always be a bobby, but he was a decent, happy-go-lucky sort of chap. He loved the football, and I just remember someone knocking his hat off, his police helmet, and it was sort of being kicked around, but nobody cared. He really didn't care. And then the next day, I think it was the Daily Mail or the Daily Express, had amazing pictures of Roy in the changing rooms, drinking beer with the players, helping them take their boots off, and that again just sort of illustrates the culture of the moment, of the time. You know, I don't think the Chief Constable would be too happy nowadays if his officers were drinking beer on duty and pulling players' football boots off. But at that particular time, the euphoria, I mean, everything went out the window, everything.
Were there any chanting or songs?
Well, look, the songs, Malcolm MacDonald, who was the Newcastle centre forward, who was, in fairness, a phenomenal athlete. And at the time, there used to be a programme called Sporting Superstars, and Ron Pickering, who was a great athletics man, he used to do the commentating. And MacDonald ran the 100 yards, I think it was then, in very near international class times. So, and if you see the pictures, bearing in mind he was jumping out of 2 foot of mud, right? You look at the height that, you know, that guy got. So he was, in fairness, a phenomenal athlete. But he was also one of those people whose ego wrote massive cheques that could never be cashed. And he'd said to the national media, "I'll score 10. I will set the record for the FA Cup." Well, you can imagine how that went down with the people of Hereford. They're going, "Oh yeah." So when he arrived, he got the bird. I could tell you that now. And I just remember, you know, lots of people chanting, "Superstar, how many goals have you scored so far?" You know, and that went on and on and on. So that's one of the things, probably, if you spoke to him, he'd probably say, "I wish I hadn't said that."
The final whistle blew. What happened then?
Well, it went nuts.
Could you just say the final
Oh,
whistle?
yeah. When the final whistle blew, and there was quite a bit of extra time, and people were dead on their feet. You know, you could see the players had just given everything they could, and same with the Newcastle players. The pitch was so sapping. So when that final whistle went, I mean, it was like you know, a nuclear explosion. The whole place just erupted. Excitement, disbelief. You know, some wags are going, "Ooh, you know, we've got Newcastle and West Ham. You know, we've got to get tickets for West Ham now. We'll do the same to them." But it was one of those special moments in time where everybody remembers where they were. It's like when John Kennedy was assassinated. People will tell you where they were. People will tell you where they were on that day. The memories were so powerful, were so evocative and so special that they kind of are locked into your memory bank forever. And I'm sure there are lots of people who go, well, the birth of my son or my daughter, getting married, and that goal or that match at Hereford are the things that I'll take with me to my grave. So it was special.
That goal, what legacy it leaves, and also Hereford FC, what does it mean to the city and the county?
Well, that goal or that match is something that happens so infrequently, once in a lifetime. Everything just came together, and the sort of what it left.
Sorry, but I really. Yeah, sorry, Nick.
Yeah, okay. The legacy of that goal has been amazing. If you think about the context of it, you know, Hereford were a lowly Southern League club playing against First Division set of internationals. Lots of people probably until then said, when you said, oh, we're from Hereford, they said, don't you mean Hertford? So all of a sudden Hereford was being talked about in really positive, in a special way. The goal went on to be, I think, the goal of the century in the end. And John Motson was starting his career with the BBC. It was his first commentary. It made his career. He's dined out on that, you know, for 40 odd years. So it's left a massive legacy. On the slightly downside, I think aspirationally, for Hereford FC now, as it is, people always think that Hereford will always do that, and they expect, you know, amazing results or something that is just unbelievable. It doesn't happen very often in professional sport, and as the world has moved on, it's got harder and harder and harder. But nobody can ever take that moment out of history. That moment sits in the history of football, in the history and the DNA of Hereford. That game is very much part and parcel of it. So I think the legacy is that, quite rightly, we'll always remember it. We'll always be able to talk about it because it was an exceptional moment in time, and it happened right here in little old Hereford.